How you doing, YouTube? Matt Massive Beer Reviews back with a very, very interesting, at least to me, re-review. Now it would be Spencer Trappist Ale. Yeah, Spencer Brewery, they burst onto the scene in 2014 as not just a Trappist brewery, but an American Trappist brewery. Who would have thunk it back then? Especially, it was kind of crazy that these things would happen. Now they've been around for about 6 years or so. And I believe I have only reviewed one beer from them, and that would be this beer. I reviewed this beer in April of 2015. We couldn't get it in and around my area. They started releasing this beer in April, I believe, of 2014, when they originally got the kind of the okay to start producing beer from the whole Trappist uppity biggie guys, whatever the hell you want to call them. What do you want to call them? Uppity. Why do I say uppity ups? That doesn't make any sense. Bigwigs. Let's just go there. Bigwigs. Anyway, and it took about a year for me to kind of get a hold of one of those. And I loved it quite a bit. A big kind of fruity, bready nose to it. And just came off as quintessential kind of Belgian table-ish beer, even though it's a little bit higher ABV. It's 6.5. Done. Did not review any of their other beers because I didn't really see them all that much. We didn't get them out in PA. I haven't really seen a ton of them in Jersey. And there's been ones that they've produced that I've really wanted to try, from their IPA to some barrel-aged stuff to some dark stuff. Just haven't had any kind of pop up and around me. But I have seen this from time to time on shelves. This particular bottle, or I should say this particular 4-pack, I've been staring down for a good part of a year, to be honest with you. I go to this local bottle shop, not super local, but I have to go out there for like grocery shopping area, out in Ledgewood, New Jersey area, and look around, and there's an area where they keep non-cold stuff, and this is kind of sitting there, and I'm like, just hamming and hawing each time I see it. So a year later, today actually, I'm out that way, and I'm like, you know what? Let me grab this goddamn thing. I'm like, I was just going to drink it. It had nothing to do with a review. I was just like, I haven't had it in a while. I really want to revisit it. And I decide, turn on the back and look at the date code on there. Yeah, who knows what that means? I do, because I did a little bit of research. So I said, okay, let me see how old this is. So basically, they do their date coding. Everything past the 2 digits up front and the 3 numbers that follow, everything past that means gobbledygook. It's AD 098 is really what means anything. So the 098 means the 98th day. It's a Julian dating, so most people will get that. Okay, the 98th day, which I believe was April 8th. AD, I was like, what is that? And kudos to Spencer for actually putting their whole kind of process and what they do as far as dating and all that stuff on their website. It was super easy to find. And A means 1, and D means A, B, C, D. 2014. So this beer was bottled in April 8th of 2014. They started putting beer out into the world, February, March of 2014. So this is possibly one of the first bottles to roll off that kind of first foray into beerdom, and I'm kind of pumped about it. Now, they go out of their way on their website to say this has a shelf life of 2 years. We are at 6 years now, so from their perspective, this is no longer a viable beer. I say pshaw on you. A 6.5% Trappist ale should last 6 years. It should grow very beautifully in the 6 years. So I'm kind of pumped to dive into this sucker. I broke out the old school Duvel snifter. If you want to go back and watch my reviews, you can just skim through them if you want, and you'll see for the first couple hundred of them, I used only this glass because to me this is the quintessential perfect drinking vessel. I've switched up since then just because I was like, why am I doing that? It's one of those weird kind of things I get into, but I figured it apropos or very kind of full circle to go back and bring the Duvel thing. I was actually going to go get my old jacket that I wore during that review and dress up the whole same way, but I didn't want to go that far. So, what is this beer? This is a long review, so buckle up. I'm going to get a lot of hate on this one. They actually have in the front here, Spencer Trappist Ale, and it says pair with family and friends. You actually see that a ton, that statement, pair with family and friends, or some variation of that. You see that a ton in the beer world nowadays. A lot of breweries say this pairs best with friends and family, all that kind of stuff. I think this is one of the first breweries I saw put that on one of their labels, so ahead of the curve Spencer was, so that's pretty cool. As far as the beer, actually, what's written on here, it says, but inspired by traditional rectifree ales brewed by monks for Monk's Table, Spencer's full-bodied, golden-hued Trappist ale with fruity accents, dry finish, and light hop bitterness. St. Joseph's Abbey in Spencer, Massachusetts, is home to a community of Trappist monks and the first American Trappist brewery. Following the Benedictine, there you go, tradition of ora et labora, prayer and work, the monks pursue a simple life of contemplative prayer, manual labor, and hospitality. The brewery helps support the monks in their charitable outreach. Suggested glassware, tulip, okay, bottle storage upright. And I'm going to say this is probably right around 48 degrees, which is probably spot on perfect for a beer like this. I'm guessing. Now, where's my bottle opener? That is something I will need. I usually have 19 of these things, and I do not see any of them. So what I will do is, see, my wife is fantastic. She gave me a bottle opener. Thanks, babe. Let's crack into this sucker and see what it's got. I'm trying not to shake this around too much. Ooh, nice hiss on this. Okay. Not trying to shake this around too much because I know there's a decent amount of sediment in here. But it'll be interesting to see how... Oh, yeah, I fucked up because there's a ton of sediment coming out of here. But I'll see how this beer kind of stands up to what I originally thought of this beer. Now, different beer. This could certainly be around the same lot number, being that this beer was actually bottled a year before I reviewed it the first time. But if I'm going to say anything, that beer looks markedly darker based off of memory. I watched a review today, just do a little bit of a refresher on it. But it's got this haziness to it, the soft haziness to it, but it looks much, much darker. Going from apple juice to apple cider is the kind of vibe that I'm getting here. Actually, really nice carbonation on it. It was actually, I wouldn't say overly carb, but aggressively carb the first time I reviewed this beer. And the carbonation definitely stood pat on this. It had a nice hiss going on for it. I'm trying to look. There's a decent murkiness on the glass itself. So, I have no idea how this was kept. It could have been on the shelf since it actually got delivered to the store. But it looks like an oxidized Belgian pale ale. Now, at first thought, you might be like, oh man, that sucks. I will sit here and I will champion oxidation. I'm not going to say it's the best thing to happen to all beers, but to blanketly say oxidation is a bad thing when it comes to beers is just not true. And if any beer can hold up to oxidation, not just hold up, but actually use it in a positive sense, it typically is a Trappist beer. So we'll see how this one lands. So the carbonation is good, soft, kind of I keep saying kind of oxidative properties, oxidative look to it. Don't actually know, haven't smelled it or tasted it yet, but looks the part of an aged Belgian. Let's put it that way. It's good nose, Belgian style. I don't want anybody to get pissed off. It smells like caramel water. I'm actually not getting a ton of oxidation on here, at least on the nose. A little bit, man. Just the slightest. It's not even like cardboard. It's like the slightest, most damp paper in the history of mankind. Not even worth even noting. But it's caramel water in a very beautiful way. This is kind of where I wanted this beer to go. My Belgian, I would say more pale ale or triple. I like to get to here. Now, they're calling this kind of like a table beer. 6.5% is probably a little bit, well, let's put it this way. It's a lot higher than what most Trappist breweries serve at the table. So take that for what it's worth. It's probably the just beefed up version of that beer so they could sell it to people, because even back then, no one was going to buy like a 3.5% Belgian table beer. Now they will, but back then they wouldn't. It's all malt driven. I got this bright kind of green apple thing off of this beer in my previous review. I'm getting more into like a kind of Macintoshy caramelized kind of apple kind of vibe off of this. That bready note is still there, but it's getting a little bit more desserty because of the caramel on this. There's a little bit of date, a little bit of fig characteristics going in here, but it smells really, really pretty. It smells exactly where I kind of wanted it to go. And honestly, for a 6-year-old, 6.5%, Belgian table / pale ale, I'm pretty happy so far. Let's dive into this sucker. Cheers. Ooh, that's delicious. It's 1,000% delicious. It is so much caramel. with that little bit of date figginess. But the coolest part about this is that carbonation is really still aggressive, and there's a decent bittering hop presence on this. I don't remember getting that from the original. It's like a spiciness. It's a ghost of hops past. There was probably more to this hop characteristic that just maybe melded better with the beer, but with it having that subtle oxidation, it is more there in the taste than it is in the nose, but definitely not over the top. And this beer kind of morphing into this kind of sweet Werther's original caramel water deliciousness. Then you get this cool pop of this spicy old aged hops of ghosts of hops past, mind you. I think it ends up being a really, really fun beer. Like a really fun, really well-aged beer. I am super pumped. I got this for $13 for a 4-pack. Off the shelf. Daddy likey, man. Yeah. I mean, this brings me back. It really does. Not to the beer that I reviewed, 6 years ago or 5 years ago. It just takes me back to my journey through Belgian beer. And again, I keep saying Belgian beer. Understand that I know there's a difference between a Belgian beer and a Belgian influenced beer, because this is not brewed there. I'm not going to argue those points, so please don't write it down below, which means you're all going to write it now. But, and it brings me back to my journey into beer in general, which was mostly Belgian beer. And, you're talking about Belgian beer in a time, late 90s, early 2000s, when, outside of some American breweries that were kind of on the come up, those new school breweries like Sierra Nevada and Dogfish Head and stuff like that, a bulk of the beers that I got were Belgian beers. You know what I mean? There was a lot of imported stuff, a lot of Euro beers, a lot of Canadian beers, Unibrew. A lot of the Trappist kind of old guard, from the Rocheforts to the Chimay to the Westmalls to those kind of things, St. Bernardus, which obviously isn't Trappist, but you know what I'm getting at. And what goes part and parcel with those kind of beers and those beers being not all that popular back in the day is age. I find this on a shelf, I get giddy. When I found, those beers on a shelf 20 plus years ago, they were almost always aged for a decent amount, because, logistics, getting the beer over here, getting it to the shelves, getting it out there, and then having people actually pick them up was a much longer process. So, this beer is 6 years old. Back then, if this was made back then and it was imported, it might take 2 years for this to hit my shelf. So a lot of these kind of Belgian lower ABV kind of pale ales, table beers already had a couple years on them. And then once you add a couple more years to them, they're sitting on the shelf for 4, 5, 6 years. So this is really kind of wheelhouse for me as far as memory and as far as really where I cut my teeth getting into beer, because this is the stuff I grew up on. I mean, sure, I had some fresh stuff, sure, I had even older stuff. But having these kind of soft, aged Belgian beers, which are pinnacle of aging. I mean, you have this little bigger pop of oxidation right there. I think I might have got a little sediment in that one. Anyway, I know I get the sediment and the taste, I shouldn't have swirled it like that. I should have just drank it, because I'm not getting a nose off of this beer. A little pro tip for you guys. But I swirled it and I probably got a little piece of, or a decent amount of that kind of sediment in there, because I got a little metallic vibe on that little sip there. Anyway. And then just, I lost my train of thought, but to go back to the whole thing about like these beers being aged, and it's what I'm used to. It's just really beautiful memories. Oh, I was going to talk about, quintessential aging, which is, people always ask me, how do you age this? What should you age that? I have this. Should I age that? Listen, aging is always a crapshoot. I'm not going to sit here and tell you this is going to age perfectly every time, or this will never age. You could have a beer that people are going to say, like, that's the best aging beer in the world. You can age a case of, all of them could be poop. Conversely, there could be a beer where everybody's like, man, that shit does not age. It can age like a gem. But there are rules, or there are guidelines, I should say, to it. And those guidelines are, basically, you start off with the most simplest beer possible. And that simplest beer possible is a core 4 beer that is bottle conditioned. And that bottle conditioning is one of the most important things about aging a beer, because it helps just keep it stable as opposed to forced carbonation. because you end up a little bit more in kind of negative oxygen in the beer, and there's not an organic thing to kind of flush out some of that oxygen. You still have some fermentation in the bottle. Even if there is oxygen in there, it can kind of help the beer along. And sure, it's a Belgian beer. There probably is a dollop of Belgian candied sugar in this, so there is technically an added component beyond those core 4 ingredients. But, Belgian candied sugar is, it's beet sugar. It's really not going to do much as far as negative goes. So it's almost like adding like a dextrose or something like that to a beer nowadays. Although that adds more flavor than dextrose. But brewer sugar nowadays, when I use that, it's almost like just additional sugars for the yeast to eat to make it a little bit kind of easier to make the beer. Or not easier, bad word. Better way to make the beer. Let's put it that way. And, yeah, this is a long review, but I don't care. But yeah, I think this is fantastic. I don't think everybody would love this beer. I swirled it again like an asshole. I don't think everybody would love this beer, because I think its age is something that you have to not just want, but understand. And maybe that sounds a little bit pretentious, but, if you drink a decent amount of aged beer, even some things that people might construe as sideways or negative, you might view it as a positive. And if you're one of those people, this is probably going to be some of the better beers you're going to have, in my opinion, because, there's a reason why Belgian beer holds up over time, and a reason why they've made beer for so long and everybody's dug it for so long. And to see an American brewery kind of take up the mantle of the Trappist stamp and make a beer like this, that their first run out of the chute, literally the first beers that started to come out of the monastery, couldn't have been far earlier than this. 2 months maybe. And to have this beer hold up over 6 years and still be drinkable, not just drinkable, but really delicious in an aged form, is a testament to how well they make beer. What else can I say? I can say this. Is this one of the better Belgian influenced beers that I've had? As like, yes. Is it Mount Rushmore status? Probably no. I'm not going to sit here and say this is the best beer I've ever had or best aged Belgian beer I've had, but it's delicious. And it makes me happy. And that's what beer is really all about. Value and availability. I paid $13 for a 4-pack of this off the shelf. It's aged beer, so that's going to may vary for you. But that's how much. They only had one 4-pack left, and I'm pissed. Because actually I was like, okay, let me grab this 4-pack and go grab the one furthest in the back. Just because of light struckness and all that kind of stuff. But this is the only one left. So take that for what it's worth and leave you with, if you like what we like this. If you like aged beer, if you like Trappist beer, if you like aged beer, and if you like Trappist beer, you'll like this beer. So there you go. Super long-winded beer in the books. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the review. Down there if you want to talk about it. Massive Beers if you want to check me out doing the social media stuff. Beer Massive if you want to check me out doing the whole podcasting thing. And hopefully you guys enjoyed the review. Hopefully you're enjoying a little bit of a Spencer right now. And hope to see you next time. Cheers.